Every thought arising is unimportant. And if you watch and observe the mind, it might be, trying to come up with reasons why that statement is true. Every thought arising is unimportant. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't be useful. We'll talk about that in a second. But somewhere along the way, through patterns and programs, there is this feeling that because a thought arises, it needs to be reconciled, considered, resolved. And yet every resolution of a thought, or the interest in resolving that thought, is just another thought. And this means all thoughts are unimportant. Positive, negative, they're all unimportant to being. Now, when I mentioned that they can be useful, yes, there are times in the play of life when, such as when critical thinking or creativity can be useful as the character to get something done. But even then, that usefulness, the thoughts arising in that illusion of usefulness, are also unimportant. With this knowledge, this instinctual knowing of our true nature, of what is, thoughts can be seen to be unimportant because they aren't personal. They aren't personal to this character or that character. And with that knowledge, then they can just be allowed. Allow all thoughts to be. This isn't about only thinking positive thoughts, only thinking negative thoughts, or not thinking negative thoughts, more positive thoughts over the negative. They're all on the same side of the table, so to speak. They're all just arising. Allow them to be, allow them to arise. See that they don't come from anywhere. See that they don't go anywhere. See that they don't belong to you, that you're not the one creating them. You're not in control of them happening. And again, the mind might come, because the mind, which also doesn't exist, is just another thought. It can feel almost attacked, like you're telling me I'm not useful. You tell me that I'm that it don't matter. And while that is true, there can be some defense mechanisms arising because it's feeling attacked, or at least challenged. I mean, it doesn't need to be that attacked. It doesn't need to be that violent in its approach. But when you can see that all thoughts are unimportant and that they just happen, then you can just allow them to be and realize that no additional thinking or brain CPU needs to be utilized to process why they're arising. Why did that come up, or the meaning behind them? And the mind loves that meaning. It loves that food to chew on. Why did that happen? Why did I have that dream? And as is always the case on these talks, there's no judgment for anyone that wants to find meaning behind dreams, or meaning behind thoughts. But the truth is that there is no meaning behind them. They're just arising. And if you want to put it in a positive and negative standpoint, then you can say, well, if the attempt to find meaning behind thoughts is to look for something positive, then the flip side of that is that there might be some negative meaning, and then you're just in this tangle of one versus the other. This one's good, this one's bad. Try to have more good. look and see that the good and bad are non-existent. The good thoughts and the bad thoughts, they're not good or bad. They're just arising. And that's where peace is. That's where the space of being sits, lives, in the observation of the thoughts arising and the allowing for them to just be. And another talk, my friend Tigray made a great mention, listened to another talk and mentioned something called mental fasting. And I'll do another talk about our conversation regarding that. But it's, if thoughts arise and there is simply the allowance of them to be, and there's no additional thoughts piled on to try to reconcile those or fix those or make them not happen, then you can see this space between the thought arising and the observer, your true nature, what you truly are as the witness to the thought arising. And it's not separate from. It seems that there might be this apparent separateness, but you can find peace in the simple observation that a thought arising doesn't need to be considered. I've done another talk on an awareness game or awareness exercise called Invisible Backpack. You can search for it if there's interest, but it's simply an exercise of walking around in the day, and when a thought is arising that's trying to grab a hold of something and chew on it, you're using another thought to do it, but you're basically saying, well, if we're gonna process that thought arising and try to figure out what's going on with it, then I need to put that in this backpack. You got to carry it around, and that can be useful. But you don't need to pretend you have an invisible backpack on to just see and sit and observe that when they're coming up, that you can just sit with them and allow them to be, and know that they're not you, they're not your thoughts, they're not personal, they're just arising, they're just happening. This may be simple to do. It may be easier said than done. But it can start with the first step of at least observing the space between the one that's able to observe a thought arising and the fact that it is just arising. And if you can start with that, you don't need to go any further. You can just keep doing that. There's a mantra that sort of plays over, and a mantra thought that plays up. And I don't mean mantra as in some special sound, but it's when there's observing of stuff created because other people are doing something or they're thinking something. And there's a lot of this on social media, and it's just let it play. Just let it play. The world does not need your commentary. It doesn't need your commentary on what people are doing and saying and thinking. It doesn't. And the more time that you spend thinking about that and trying to make that change, really the more suffering you create, because even the convincing of someone, even the input on the way that someone else is doing something, even the acceptance of that input doesn't create true satisfaction. It doesn't create true peace. The mind just moves on to the next thing, and in fact it's empowered. Well, that person took my advice on this approach to whatever, and so maybe they need that again in the future. And they don't need that again in the future, and you don't need to assist them with it. In fact, if you can find the space of watching, let's just say watching someone do something, and capture either the thought or capture the advice before it reaches the mouth, and capture it as the thought, and look at it and be like, the words that are about to come out are not needed here. They're not. You actually find, maybe there might be resistance at first, but you may find that there's more peace in that. And then you can do that over and over and over again and find quiet. Find quiet in that space. This is an especially interesting exercise when it comes to kids, raising children, because children need guidance on certain things. But there's no more peaceful feeling or peaceful arising of joy than to let it play, let a child do something, not that's going to be harmful for them, but so that they can actually learn from those efforts, learn from trying something over and over and over again. And the same goes, you don't need kids to do this. You can see this in friends and family and people in the world and people online. Look for that piece. Don't look for the satisfaction of convincing someone externally that they should be doing something different. Let it play. Let things that are happening play out. And if you're like, no, some things need interjection, that's not part of that's almost a silly argument. That's a silly road to go down. You can, sure, let it play or don't, but it's interesting to try. Let it play comes up. And what I also notice is interesting that even in the context of watching that happen, there and the thought that arises, let it play, there's even in some cases the mind wants to verbalize and tell the person, just let it play. Well, interestingly enough, that's the same thing as what they might be doing to try to convince someone else. So it ends up being a reminder for you to, even the wanting to share that, why do you bother spending your time trying to convince this person of that? Even that let it play energy trying to come out is it ends up being a really good reminder to listen to your own thoughts, listen to your own words in that same context. Thoughts aren't bad. We're not trying to get rid of them. We're not trying to remove them. We're not really trying to do anything. But there is peace in the realization, in the understanding that when a thought arises, that it doesn't belong to you and it doesn't need to be reconciled. It doesn't need to be resolved. And if you can sit with that, if you can watch that and see it happening, and you can continue returning back to that. And again, you're going to get other thoughts that come up with that. You know, it might pile on back, wow, you didn't grab a hold of that, really good job. You know, it'll do that too. But again, that's why they're all on the same side of the table, so to speak. Find that peace by allowing thoughts to be. Look for the space of being in that place. And go there repeatedly. And if you go there for some time and then it gets away and you get caught up in it, that's okay. Just go back. Go back. I know I try not to give description or prescription and tell people what to do, but try it out.